What is alive? For centuries, biology has had a simple, comforting answer. To be alive, you must breathe, you must replicate, you must have DNA. It is a set of rigid, sacred rules that defines the boundary between the living and the inanimate. It is the foundation of our entire civilization, the assumption that we know the rules of the game. But what if I told you there is something in this world that mocks those rules? Something that exists in the gray space between being and nothingness. Something that does not breathe, does not replicate, does not consume energy in any way we understand, and yet it is the most efficient, unrelenting killer on this planet. It is not a virus, it is not a bacteria, it is not a fungus, it is not a parasite. It is something much more primal. It is just a shape, a misfolded, broken shape. I am your host for Vantage Elite, and tonight we are descending into the biological abyss. We are investigating the prion, the biological zombie. This is not just a disease, it is an architectural error in the code of life itself. And once this error starts, there is no way to patch it. There is no way to stop it. Welcome to the edge of reality. Think about the human body. It is a masterpiece of folding. Every protein in your brain, every building block of your cognition, is folded into a precise, specific 3D shape. It's like an origami master who has spent millions of years folding proteins into a functioning machine of consciousness. But what happens when you introduce a piece of paper that is folded incorrectly? A prion is simply a protein that has been twisted into the wrong shape. That's it. It's a geometric anomaly. But here is where the horror begins. When this broken, misfolded protein enters your brain, it doesn't attack you. It doesn't trigger your immune system. Because your body looks at this protein and says, "That's just me. That's just a normal protein." It is a Trojan horse that has been inside you, disguised as your own self all along. But once that twisted shape touches one of your healthy, properly folded proteins, it forces it to fold into the same broken shape. And then those two force two more. And those four force 8. It is a biological domino effect that occurs in the complete silence of your own skull. It is the slowest, most inevitable suicide of the human brain. And the terrifying part? It has a 100% mortality rate. There is no cure. There is no treatment. Once the first domino falls, your brain is already gone. You just don't know it yet. We look at the world and we assume that science has the answers. We assume that if we just find the right drug, if we just decode the right sequence, we can stop the decay. But what if decay is the default setting? What if the universe is programmed to break down? Prions aren't just proteins. They are the signature of the entropy that defines our reality. They are the ultimate reminder that the biological machine you are living in is not as sturdy as you think. It is held together by the most delicate of structural balances, and one single, misfolded shape is all it takes to bring the whole structure crashing down. In the middle of the 20th century, deep in the isolated, mist-covered mountains of Papua New Guinea, medical researchers stumbled upon something that shattered their understanding of medicine. The 4 people were suffering from a disease they called Kuru. It was known as the laughing sickness. Patients would lose control of their limbs, they would tremble, they would laugh uncontrollably, and then they would simply shut down. It was a slow, agonizing dissolution of the self. At the time, the medical establishment thought it was a genetic fluke. They thought it was a localized oddity, something that only happened to a small, isolated tribe. But when the researchers looked closer, when they investigated the rituals of the 4, they found the dark truth. The disease was being transmitted through the act of funeral cannibalism. They were consuming the brains of their deceased loved ones, and in doing so, they were consuming the prions. The doctors initially looked for a virus. They looked for bacteria. They spent years testing, injecting, filtering, and studying. They found nothing. No DNA, no RNA, nothing that could reproduce, no genetic material that could explain the contagion. And yet, it kept killing. It wasn't until the 1980s that Stanley Prusner finally identified the culprit, the prion. He was ridiculed. He was mocked by the brightest minds in biology. How could a protein, they asked, a dead structure, be infectious? How could a piece of matter that has no life spread like a disease? He was right, and the world should have stopped. When you incinerate a virus, you kill it. When you boil bacteria, you destroy it. When you irradiate a pathogen, you neutralize it. But prions? You can bake them in an oven. You can drench them in formaldehyde. You can zap them with high-intensity radiation. They don't care. They are not alive, so you cannot kill them. Think about the implications of that for a second. We live in a world where we trust the sterilization of our medical tools, our food, our blood supplies. We assume that killing the pathogens makes us safe. But what if you are fighting an enemy that is already dead? The discovery of the prion was the moment biology realized that there are parts of our existence that operate outside the rules of life. It was the moment we realized that we are vulnerable to something that is fundamentally indifferent to our survival. A prion doesn't want to kill you. It doesn't have a will to survive. It is just a mistake. A recursive, repeating mistake that consumes everything it touches. If this is a simulation, if this is a coded reality, then prions are the equivalent of a corrupted file that keeps overwriting the valid data. They are the logic error in the code of humanity, and the error is spreading. Let's talk about mad cow disease. In the 1990s, the United Kingdom panicked. Cows were acting strangely. They were losing coordination. They were dying. And soon, the panic crossed the species barrier. Humans began to die of a new variant of Creutzfeldt-Jakob Disease. The government response? Total denial. They told the public it was impossible for the disease to jump from cows to humans. They told us the beef was safe. They told us the risks were negligible. But the prions didn't care about their PR strategy. We now know that we were feeding cattle the remains of other cattle. We turned herbivores into unwilling carnivores. We created an artificial cycle of transmission, a feedback loop of biological disaster, and we fed it back to ourselves. We created the monster, and then we tried to pretend it wasn't there. This is the hidden cost of the industrial food complex. We are so obsessed with efficiency, so obsessed with mass production, that we ignore the fundamental biological warnings. But here is the part they really don't tell you: the incubation period. Prion diseases can stay hidden in the human brain for 20, 30, even 40 years. You could have consumed tainted meat in the late 90s, and you wouldn't know until the 2030s. We have an entire generation of people living as potential carriers, unaware that a time bomb is ticking inside their skull. The system relies on your ignorance of this. It relies on the assumption that if you aren't sick now, you aren't sick at all. But prions are the ultimate long game. They don't need to win today. They just need to wait. Is this the great filter? Is this why we are constantly seeing mysterious neurodegenerative spikes? Is this why dementia is becoming the defining health crisis of the 21st century? Maybe it's not just aging. Maybe it's not just lifestyle. Maybe we are all just playing the odds against a ghost we unleashed decades ago. The corporate gears are locked into the production schedule, and they don't care if the risk is exponential, as long as the quarterly earnings hit the mark. We are living in a system that consumes its own future to satisfy its current hunger. And that brings us to the most dangerous aspect of this prison: the blindness of the inhabitants. Are you starting to feel the weight of it? Are you starting to realize that the most dangerous thing in this world isn't an alien invasion or a nuclear war? It's a misfolded protein that we have no way to stop. The prion isn't just a biological anomaly. It's a metaphor for the entire simulation. It is a glitch that replicates itself. It is a mistake that becomes the reality. If you are born into a reality where the very proteins of your brain can turn against you for no reason, what does that do to the human spirit? We become a species that is constantly looking for the fold. We become a planet that is terrified of its own shadow. This is the ultimate revelation, the realization that turns the prisoner into the architect. We are not victims of circumstance. We are the architects of this cage. Our obsession with efficiency, our obsession with more, our obsession with controlling nature has blinded us to the reality of the physical limits of our world. The door is not a place. The door is the moment you withdraw your belief. The door is the moment you realize that the biological world isn't a limitless machine. It's a fragile, finite environment that we have broken. But you need to be prepared for what happens when you start to see it. The system will try to force you back into the narrative. It will use the medical establishment to keep you looking at the symptoms rather than the cause. It will use the experts to tell you that the rise in neurodegenerative diseases is just a natural phenomenon. But if you can maintain your awareness, if you can look at the data, look at the history, and recognize the cage for what it is, you stop being a subject of the system and start being a witness to it. You become an observer of the biological decay rather than a participant in the denial. And that is where the simulation fails. Because the moment you observe the glitch as a glitch, the illusion loses its power over you. The moment you realize that you are not the character on the screen, but the light behind the projection, the game is over. So, where do we go from here? We go nowhere. We are already here, but we see. The system will keep trying to render your reality into a shape that suits their corporate control. But you will be moving through it differently. You will be walking through the world with the knowledge that you are a potential carrier. You are an error in their perfect system, and the error is the only thing that is truly free. History is no longer a script you have to follow. It is a future you are actively carving out of the data. You have the keys, you have the consciousness, and you have the awareness. The cage was never locked. You were just waiting to realize you could open the door. Look up, look within, and finally, see the world for what it truly is. Stay skeptical, stay awake, stay elite.